Okay, everybody, I hope you did see the two videos I posted yesterday. If you didn't, maybe check out. There's one on lead poisoning in water supplies, kind of did on request, talking about an issue that's ongoing across the country, not just in Flint, Michigan. Also, another one on prescription drug middlemen in Ohio and actually across the country, basically running small business pharmacies out of business, and also overbilling the state Medicaid for whatever they're supplying now. Today, this is going to be a kind of a very different tenor to everything. I might do another Farrakhan feminism thing later, but that's not what this video is going to be about, this live stream. This is going to be a lot of venting and ranting, but hopefully you'll get something coherent out of it. I know that it's very difficult nowadays to comment on issues that are close to your, they're close to your mental place of peace, and they disrupt it without freaking out. So, I think that for me, some of this is going to be a challenge, but I'll try to make these this video as coherent as possible and as on topic as possible. So the first problem that we're going to deal with is the one that I think is it should be the least, and that's the fake mourning over what's his name, Stephen Hawking of I think he was from Cambridge University in Britain. And in my opinion, some of the people that by the way, I'm not the only person who thinks this. If you watch Lionel Nation, he's been laughing at this the whole morning. That a lot of people, the only reason that they really do embrace the personality of somebody like Stephen Hawking, it was because of the whole wheelchair thing and the fact that he suffered from ALS. And bless his heart, he was a very is a very crucial voice in science. Presenting a lot of theories that at the time were, when he came out, he wasn't exactly astrophysics. Okay, so astrophysics has never been the most sexy field, even with the whole moon landing and the Apollo program and all the probes sent to outer space. It's not as if the astrophysics aspect was such a big deal. So his black hole theory and the radiation and everything. So I would be lying to you if I said I understood it. I'm not an astrophysicist anyway. Dave Murphy says, what gets me is that religious people are condemning Hawking to hell when it isn't their place. So you're saying hell isn't their place, or it's not their place to condemn him? I don't know. I think I've heard something about that. I could care less. I think one of the things I was reading while getting ready for this was that Hawking's first wife, I think he was married more than once, but his first wife was very stringently Christian. I don't remember what sect it was, but it put as much of a strain on their marriage as did the fact that she basically did not have a full husband. His disease made him basically incapacitated, and it was an invasion. And I'm not talking about just in the way you're thinking about it, in the biblical sense. I'm saying that they needed a lot of aids to they needed a lot of nurses' aides in order to keep him alive and to take care of him. So it was a huge invasion of their life, and she ended up falling in love with I guess he was some sort of dance instructor or something. And for a while their marriage just went on and on, and I think eventually they got divorced or something. Not that that's the main message here. But Dade saying religious people are acting overjoyed that he died and are saying, "Ha ha, he's in hell," which is an immature attitude. Well, okay. let me just say, when people do that, I could care less. Just like there's the auto grief, the auto mourn that Lionel Nation talks about, and he's been talking about it all morning. And I'm very, I talk a lot about what other users and other creators put up. Uh, if I think that they resonate very deeply with me, and in that case, it does. What the last celebrity I remember that died and had like a very uh, I was pretty beat up over it was Gene Wilder, who was an actor, um, and he'd had Alzheimer's or something. But I thought that Gene Wilder was one of the best talents that of that generation. The '70s and '80s comedy and things like that. Um, I was pretty beat up over that. I wouldn't say beat up, but when Prince died, I was like, yeah, this is a big loss for the world of music. um, Trying to think of other cases, but the fact is, when a lot of these celebrities die, it's not really as big of a deal as people think. You know, Stephen Hawking lived to the age of 76, even with an incapacitating illness. Yes, I mean we're losing a great mind, but it's understandable that he passed away. I want to turn your attention. Some people are saying, "Oh, it's such an amazing uh, accomplishment of his that he became an astrophysicist," which is absolutely was. But there are people who they made incredible accomplishments given very little of a head start, and one of them was this Srinivasa Ramanujan. He's from I believe yeah, it says Madras state in India from 1887. His father was a clerk in a fabric store. The family was Brahmin, and Ramanujan's maternal grandfather was a minor official in a local court. Thus, the family was poor but socially respectable. Ramanujan was born in that grandfather's house in a road. Soon after his birth, his mother and father moved with him to a house in the town of Kumbhakonam, and Ramanujan grew up there. The family name Ramanujan means person who contains a particle of the god Rama. The personal name Srinivasa roughly means prosperous. Okay, so let's not get into that, but he basically lived in one of the poorest parts of the world. It was racially segregated in the 19th century, and he ended up becoming one of the best mathematicians of his day. Okay, do I know a lot about this guy? Not exactly. Let me see here. What were his big accomplishments? Um, Ramanujan's style of doing mathematics developed from his introduction to higher mathematics through trigonometry and Carr's volume of 6,000 theorems. In trigonometry, one can derive multitudes of formulas or identities. Ramanujan looked for such formulas as he saw in Carr's volume. Ramanujan generated formulas which he felt to be true on the basis of intuition and the checking of some special cases. He generally did not provide a rigorous proof as a result. Generally, was not strong in establishing such rigorous proofs. He was reluctant for rigorous proof to take precedence over his intuition for the truth of his propositions. So he was kind of breaking with, in mathematics, you do have to generally make a very detailed proof of your arguments. And I've had people ask about that all the time. Ramanujan, for example, looked for the limits of infinite series. One such series became the preferred way of computing the mathematical constant pi. So we're talking about World Pi Day today, and it's coincidence, but King Kush is saying Ramon's still looking for the golden ticket. What are you talking about? It's a creepy comment. I don't know what that even means. So they say he had Asperger's syndrome or whatever, but a lot of these great minds in science, they don't even get any regard. Some of them, because of certain things they say politically, end up getting them ostracized. One of those people is James Watson, who was one of the discoverers of DNA. And James Watson ended up being ostracized because he did believe that there was a genetic reason why there was a difference in the intelligence between the races. Okay, now I'm not going to tell you whether it's correct or wrong. I'm not going to tell you that I read the whole thing. Like James Watson, he published this several years ago. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up. But there's a person who discovered DNA, and he's basically now a pariah in the scientific community. Says James Watson's most inconvenient truth: race realism and the moralistic fallacy. Let me see if I can have a better source. Recent editorials in this journal defend the right of eminent biologist James Watson to raise the unpopular hypothesis that people, so this is in medical hypotheses, that people of sub-Saharan African descent score lower on average than people of European or East Asian descent on tests of general intelligence. As those editorials imply, the scientific evidence is substantial in showing a genetic contribution to these differences. The unjustified ill treatment meted out to Watson therefore requires setting the record straight about the current state of the evidence on intelligence, race, and genetics. So look, I'm not going to tell you that this makes one race better than the other, but this is a scientist who discovered DNA, and he's being ostracized because of that. So when Watson dies, which I think he helped discover DNA with Francis Crick and two other scientists in the 50s. He's not going to be alive for very, very much longer. I doubt you're going to see this outpouring of affection for him that you got for Stephen Hawking. And then there was that sexist scientist from 2 years ago. Here we go. Nobel-winning scientist who was forced to resign over sexist comments could be reinstated as. So this was Tim Hunt. He lost his. Hold on. He lost his post at University College of London after making sexist commercial comments in Seoul, South Korea. Sir Tim could be reinstated after public outcry. So this was from 2015. And this was the guy, I don't know if you guys will remember, who claimed that, he didn't claim, he was just remarking that it's hard to be a scientist sometimes when you have so many attractive women around you. And there were a lot of funny memes here about, check out my nice rack by female scientists or whatever. That it was funny, some of the reactions. My lenses bring all the profs to the yard. And it's I can't find the comments themselves, and they don't even mention it. And this is the Daily Mail. They don't even mention the actual comments. So, my point here is that a lot of these people, and I don't even know what Tim Hunt. I don't think he was a biologist. I might be wrong. So, yeah, biochemist. Sorry. He's a British biochemist and molecular physiologist. He was awarded the 2001 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with Paul Nurse and Leland Hartwell for their discoveries of protein molecules that control the division of cells. So that's a pretty big, accomplishment. So this is what he said: "It's strange that such a chauvinist monster like me has been asked to speak to women scientists. Let me tell you about my trouble with girls. 3 things happen when they're in the lab. You fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, and then when you criticize them, they cry. Perhaps we should make separate labs for boys and girls. Now, seriously, I'm impressed by the economic development of Korea, and women scientists played, without doubt, an important role in it. Science needs women, and you should do science despite all the obstacles and despite monsters like me." And then, so all of his comments were in sarcasm and kind of self-deprecating humor, and the world freaked out about it. And then and there were a lot of nice tweets about it, like funny ones. But my point with this is that the entire world is now mourning over this Stephen Hawking. They don't know anything about his work. They don't. They couldn't care less. And in a day, they're going to be over it. They're going to be on to the next crappy topic that has nothing to do with them. And I could show you, and I will show you these people who are for they're for what they call the March for Science and stuff like that. Well, these are the same people that they support in academia that says things like this: are STEM syllabi gendered? A feminist critical discourse analysis. It says, this is the abstract. This study explored the gendered nature of STEM higher education institution through. So it's not even properly. This is from Nova Southeastern University. It's not even worded properly. Through a feminist critical discourse analysis of STEM core syllabi from a Midwest research university, I explored STEM syllabi to understand how linguistic features such as stance and interdiscursivity are used in the syllabus, and how language and courses and discourses used in the syllabi replicate the masculine nature of STEM education. Findings suggest that the discourses identified in the syllabi reinforce traditional STEM academic roles, and that power and gender in the STEM syllabi are revealed through exploration of the themes of knowledge, learning, and the teaching and learning environment created by the language used in the syllabus. These findings inform and extend understanding of the STEM syllabus and the STEM higher education institution, and lead to recommendations about how to make the STEM syllabus more inclusive for women. So, this is by Laura Parson, and basically, they based on 8 interviews with female STEM students. 2 professors recently concluded that masculine norms are to blame for the lack of female STEM graduates. According to the professors, these masculine norms include asking good questions, capacity for abstract thought and rational thought processes, motivation, independent thinking, and a relatively low fear of failure. Here's a quote. When I think about it, I guess the females rarely ask any questions, or they'll go and ask the professor like after, or if we're doing homework and we have questions. Recounted Julie, a junior majoring in physics. While the fact that women are less vocal in class was a recurring theme through research, it appears that nothing stops women from talking in class except their own fears. Physics major Olivia, for instance, expressed concerns that you don't want to sound stupid. These expectations, set according to a masculine definition of the ideal student, ultimately cause female students to experience challenges measuring up to a masculine ideal, Parson and Ozaki assert. These STEM student ideals are gendered because women are evaluated against measures and characteristics that reflect a male worker. They explain, further noting that these standards are built around the idea of an unencumbered male worker and promote an ideal that is very difficult for women students to achieve. So, and that's just talking about the feminist aspect. Then there's the trans aspect. So I have another one, and I included the link in the description. So this what feminists and progressives, and I don't care now to distinguish between progressives, because the ones that don't think this should probably start mentioning it, because their entire faction of the public, or their entire the image of progressivism is this: that you have people like this Galen Mitchell, who's a trans woman, who's also, I guess she's married to another woman who's not trans. So she says trans women and sexual orientation. So this is presented now. This is not an academic study, but they want the authority of an academic study, even if it's not. She said, picture your average trans woman for a second. Got her in your mind's eye. Okay, good. Now take a second to picture the sort of people she has sex with. Wait, okay, got it, sweet. So then she wants people to assume that they would be looking for, a dude, right? But if you really think about it, it's well known. It's actually very well known that a lot of these transsexuals, which that's what I call it, they're not actually into they're not. It's not even the same as being gay. Even if you're not a supporter of their whole political issue, you can understand that. So what does this person do in order to substantiate? So she doesn't have to go through an entire, and I'm actually using the pronoun she, I guess, and I, maybe I'm assuming her, there you go. So the whole thing is, I'm just reading through some of this here. You don't even have to go through the whole thing without them, taking offense over pronouns or taking. I saw some of her other articles, and she's getting mad at people looking for whether there's trans people at their gym or something. Listen, you go to the gym and you look weird. There's no reason anybody shouldn't look at you. People look at weird people at the gym all the time. I go to a gym. If I'm wearing a wacky shirt, people look at me. You decided to wear an identity of something that you made up, and now you have to live with it. And I don't care. And everybody talking about, oh, why are you saying that they made it up? That's really the way they feel. The way they feel is not a scientific definition. Okay, I feel like Ozzie Smith of the St. Louis Cardinals, but you don't see any World Series rings on my hands, right? So the way I feel is irrelevant. Okay. So this is the section that I really think is ridiculous about. The average trans woman is queer as fuck, and we have the data to back it up. We have the data to back it up, you transphobic motherfuckers. Catherine said, okay, so King Kush says, sounds like BS. Catherine says, Dade, some religious people perhaps, but certainly not all of us. The full range of virtues and vices can be found in any large group of human beings. Yeah, that's why I think I agree with Catherine a little more. Michael Caine in a wig, creepy. Are you talking about the photo? The photo of, let me see here. This one? I'm not sure. Tell me what you're talking about, King Kush. So, back in 2015, the National Center for Transgender Equality. So, if you're looking for the unbiased source on transgender rights, go to the National Center for Transgender Equality, right? They'll conduct unbiased research. So they conducted a survey of transgender people living in the United States. The survey asked all sorts of questions about trans folks' lives and experiences in the United States. Nearly 28,000 people completed the survey, which makes it one of the largest surveys of trans folks ever done. So I strongly suggest that you read the survey report released in 2016 over at the U.S. Trans Survey website if you're interested in disabusing yourself of many misconceptions about trans folks. Let me show this on screen. However, one part of the survey's report that's relevant to our discussion here is found on page 59. As part of the survey, respondents were asked which sexual orientation best describes them. The responses to this question are summarized in figure 4.28, sexual orientation, which I have embedded below. The graph breaks out the responses of self-identified cross-dressers, non-binary folks, trans women, and trans men. So let's add up the math here. Let's see, 10%, 14%, 16%. So that makes 30, 58, 79, 94, 6. Okay, so yeah, it does add up. And their orientations. But if you look here, cross-dressers are 41% straight or heterosexual. That's interesting. And then you would have trans women are 19% heterosexual, and then 27% gay. So, this, by the way, this is a survey again. So based on a survey, they're trying to say that you have a misconception about something that she's assuming that you thought. So first of all, we all know that surveys are very easy to, for people to just answer wrong on, or they answer the way they feel comfortable answering. There's so many identities here: asexual, bisexual, gay, lesbian, or same gender loving, pansexual. So pansexual and queer, what the hell do those two mean? You have two definitions that don't really mean anything. She doesn't even define what. Yeah, this is from that movie. What do you call it? Rocky Horror. I've never seen Rocky Horror. It just seems like a stupid movie to me, but apparently it's like a cult classic. So you have two of them, pansexual and queer, that don't really, they're just labels. It doesn't, what's behind it? What's the difference between those two? Asexual, that would mean that they're not interested in anybody. So are we supposed to have assumed that the picture at the top, if we're so wrong, should we have assumed that it was just a blank space of white, of nothing? Sexual orientation not listed. So that, again, another space of white. What the hell does that even mean? So this survey actually does not give you any answer. It actually gives you an answer that doesn't make any. It actually doesn't. It's not even an answer. You might as well have a wrong answer than no answer to this, because if she's asking the question, of the audience. What would be the picture of the person that you think they would be attracted to? And based on the responses of that survey, there's no way you could even know. There is no way you could even know. The other thing I found a bit, let me see. Yeah, a bit strange was that there are more straight trans men than gay trans men. So in that case, it actually confirms. So it's 23% to 12%, almost a 2-to-1 margin. So then, so if you were to flip the question, I know she asked about trans women, then you would actually be right. If you were asking about trans men, you would say, yeah, they're attracted to women, probably. That's what the survey says, 2-to-1 margin. Cross-dressers, yes. How do you know? But also, cross-dressers, I don't think are the same. Cross-dresser is just somebody who dresses in somebody else in the other opposite gender's clothes. That's not really a gender identity. That you're basically talking about a guy. So they're actually more straight people in that category. Now, these are the people who think that they can lecture to you about science, but there's no scientific method here. It's just a survey sample. Okay, the survey sample is actually from 2016, and it's basically a bunch of people that they're trying to. What exactly are they pushing here? Okay, they're trying to push the fact that shame on you for not knowing what they really think in their heads. That's what they're really trying to get at. They're not actually showing anything that's of real use, any knowledge that reveals anything about transsexual people. That's why, it's the same way that people relate to the universal healthcare debate. They always say that universal healthcare is the most popular solution to the affordability of healthcare in the country, to getting everybody universal access and care. The popularity of it is cited as the reason. No, the popularity of something is not a reason to move forward with the policy. Okay, if a policy is wrong, it doesn't matter how popular it is. Likewise, if you're using the results of a survey to define what gender is, then you're wrong, because the example I find best is that best for this for this topic is Larry Elder always cites the fact that there was a survey that found that 1/8 of all Americans think Elvis is still alive. Okay, now that's fine if you can prove it, but I don't think 1/8 of Americans can prove that Elvis is still alive. King Kush says cross-dressed catfish. Sometimes I think King Kush, when he gets on my stream, it might have taken some acid, but I welcome you anyways. I think this is a great stream for you to be on. But in any case, I'm going to move on to some of the other topics today. But the bottom line is this, okay? Stephen Hawking died. He lived a great life for somebody who had ALS. There are a lot of scientists who out there, like that Tim Hunt that I was talking about, or James Watson, that because of this lack of freedom of expression here, freedom of speech, we can't even hear their thoughts. You can disagree with them. I'm fine with people disagreeing with them, but when you ostracize people for having, not politically correct thoughts on race, such as James Watson, where he says, I have evidence that there is DNA data to prove that sub-Saharan Africans have a lower IQ. Well, okay, argue with him, present counter evidence if you want, but by censoring him and making him a pariah, you actually show that you're not open to new scientific developments. Likewise, like in those two articles that I showed you, the one with the is science sexist, which was based on a sample of 8 female STEM students, as well as the other article I showed you in Medium, which is about the being uber gay by this woman, by this woman who used to be a man, even though she objects to it, to being called that. Those are people. They're saying we will say what science is, regardless of the data and regardless of the findings. You will bow to our science. That's what they're saying. You will bow to our science and our perspective of the world, based on what we think is the truth, and not on what we find to be the truth. Not based on the data, not testing the hypothesis. Basically, by throwing out the scientific method, we will remake science, and that's their vision of the science. And that's not. And Stephen Hawking, by the way, he had some really, he was a progressive. He was a Labor Party supporter. He was, I think, he was a supporter of Al Gore, very strong supporter of his. He was a climate science supporter. He supported the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement and the academic boycott of Israel. He was a left-wing person, but he was a great astrophysicist. It doesn't mean you have to agree with him politically. I don't agree with anything he says politically, and I'm not terribly beaten up that he died. He died at a very advanced age. He accomplished a lot. It's time for people to move on and stop being so emotional about it. Really, without the whole ALS thing, without his disability, I'm sorry to say, but his accomplishments probably wouldn't have been so well documented by the public. He wouldn't have been such a popular cultural figure. He wouldn't have been on The Simpsons. That's the thing that made him popular. His accomplishments were, and his theories. Most of his things are theories. They're not exactly provable empirically. You can't do experiments on black holes. It's not like they swallow up Malaysian Airlines airplanes, like Don Lemon has said. Okay, so you can't actually prove his theories empirically. And Lionel Nation mentioned that in his live stream. But this is a loss for the scientific community. But how about scientists that are making significantly more impactful innovations in this world as we speak, but they're not getting that platform because they don't have that impediment. The AI people, all those people. Those are the people that are really going to change your world. Stephen Hawking, he changed the scientific world, but he did not really change the world that we live in. Okay, he didn't do any heart transplants. He didn't do any, um, investigation into a new source of fuel that could replace fossil fuels. That's not what he did. There were a couple of scientists, I forgot, from one of them was from Japan, I believe. A couple of years ago, they won the Nobel Prize for past work they did that found white, that they were able to make a blue LED, and that was able to really move LED lighting into the commercial sector. So, that those are scientists that are as big. Those are the big ones. Did Trump's brother steal a Tesla time machine? Is he talking about? King Kush is asking this question. I think he's talking. I know Trump had a brother who died from alcoholism, but yeah, he's just confirming my acid theory. Now, moving on, leaving the Hawking stuff aside, and the pseudoscience and the transsexuals and the sexist science and whatever. There is a lot of stuff that happened yesterday that I was busy doing other stuff, writing and researching for those two videos. So the special election in Pennsylvania. Let me start with that one in terms of political topics. Yeah, I think I've seen the same type of reactions from some Republicans to this failure. I don't care if by the way, the absentee ballots overturn the Democratic victory, because as far as I'm concerned, the election already shows that the GOP is a failure. But I've seen some Republicans making remarks about libertarian voters in Pennsylvania, that they were saying, oh, that's the way they are. That what they really are cultural Marxists that want to have Democrats in power so they can continue complaining. Let me tell you something. In 2016, 300,000 people voted in that district. 300,000 people, and the guy was running unopposed. The guy who was in office then. Okay, and this time 200,000 voted, and it's a special election. So the lesson here is that the Republican Party is a failure. It does not know how to motivate its people. The voters themselves. I'm not a politician. I can attack the voters. If they're not motivated enough to go support somebody that they think is good, then yeah, they're to blame. But the person most to blame for this is the candidate himself. This Rick Saccone guy. if he can't win an election in a very safe Republican seat, then it's his fault. It's not a third party voter. It's not it's not Donald Trump, because Trump took time out of a schedule where, remember, there's all this Korea shit going on. There was the wall shit where he went to California, and he's fighting the government of California right now. There's DACA. There is the whole tariff deal, renegotiating NAFTA. There's a lot of things on his plate, and he goes to your district and campaigns for you and goes all out, and you lose. That is your fault. End of story to the candidate, and to the GOP. Because while I'm saying that, yeah, Donald Trump has a lot on his plate, when you have a congressional GOP led by Paul Ryan, that nobody knows what they stand for. Most of their bills, nobody even talks about. Nobody talks about anything that they're putting forward. He's super wishy-washy about everything. Talks to the press as if he's trying to continue to be the the good boy, compared to Trump being he's consistently trying to show himself in contrast to President Trump, and how he's the nice guy. He's like it's over. Okay, the Republican Party, they don't represent people who want to actually create a more limited government and end the end the surveillance state, end the tax state, end the Department of Education. deregulate the the federal government, all this stuff with the FDA governing everything, and all these federal programs that are ballooning the debt and everything like that. They don't want to do spending cuts. They don't want to do defense cuts. They don't want to do anything. So why would I, somebody who wants to do all those things, go out and vote for a party that they always talk about it, but they never do anything? And similarly, on the Democratic side, you look at this Connor Lamb, his website, he says, I believe that leaders should have priorities. There's an old saying that if everything is important, nothing is. Let me show this to you. This is the website of a congressional candidate. So here, let's fold it up. Taking immediate action to fight the heroin crisis. Who does that sound like? It sounds like Donald Trump. And indeed, this guy was a prosecutor who put a lot of heroin dealers in prison. Jobs and infrastructure. So he wants to vote here. We need a secure, reliable electric grid that cannot fail. That's pretty hard to put into law, buddy. You can't just pass a law and then the electrical grid will appear. You're going to have to find money for that. We need functioning water treatment systems that keep stormwater runoff out of our streets and guarantee safe drinking water. I direct you to my video from yesterday. Then he talks about job training. We have to invest in our people. Politicians in both parties like to talk about job training, but that talk hasn't lived up to the reality for too many students and workers in our region, and both parties bear the blame for that. So this guy, he ran on the middle of the road, union Democrat, basically the Jim Webb style Democrat. He says nothing on foreign policy, by the way, which is fine in my opinion. Fine. I think if you want to run exclusively on domestic agenda, and even say, well, if I find something that's foreign policy that I don't really know about, I'm just not going to vote. Fine. Here he says, I support unions and I'm proud to be endorsed by the AFL-CIO. I believe that all workers have the right to organize and bargain collectively for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. I know that when unions do the work, it gets done on time and on budget. Ho, 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 yeah, sure. Union members in our district can count on me to be the most effective ally they have in fighting to protect their rights, support prevailing wages and project labor agreements, and defeat the ideological extremists who want to put unions out of existence. Let me tell you something. What he said with regards to unions and prevailing wages and project labor agreements, that's the reason infrastructure plans are almost unaffordable. Because prevailing wages basically means you almost have to pay, in some cases, a tradesman 3 times per hour what they do on the open market for a government job. So do you think that it's easy to raise money for capital projects in what do you call it, in infrastructure by supporting prevailing wages? That's one of the reasons that it's so hard to get any funding for it. Okay, that's why there's so much government waste, because when you get these projects that are so huge and the pay is so long, that's why it doesn't get done on time and on budget. Because why would these companies finish their project and go on to work in a private sector project, let's say, when they get higher pay per hour, and that pay goes to, some of it goes to unions, some of it goes to the contractors, by the way. So you're getting screwed every which way, but loose. Sorry, I think that's the title of one of those Clint Eastwood movies, Every Way Which But Loose. But in any case, this position that the Democrats have, we support unions and infrastructure. Well, there's a reason why you're only getting one of those. You're getting unions, but you're not getting infrastructure, because you have to do bond issues in order to pay for the projects. So or bond issues, or sometimes to increase taxes. So then businesses flow out, but you may get your infrastructure right. Then the project takes years. Look up the Big Dig in Boston. They're trying to do it again in New York City, by the way. So that's the policy issue here in Pennsylvania. The people of Pennsylvania who voted for Connor Lamb, uh, I think that maybe they had a more coherent candidate than this Rick Saccone dude honestly, who the fuck even heard about this guy until a couple days ago. But the people who voted for Connor Lamb are voting for the inherent contradiction on the union democratic left. The people who are more union oriented, they're saying, well, we need good paying jobs, but we also need infrastructure. So we're going to have to tax people higher in order to raise money to fund that infrastructure, so we can pay a number of tradespeople, this small section of the population that they're licensed tradespeople and they're members of the union. That's not the way that you cause an economic boom. People who think that the New Deal is a good example of that, that's not the way it worked during the New Deal. By the way, union membership, I don't believe it was, it's not like the government supported union membership during the New Deal so much. That was still during the time when there was strike breaking and, the whole union Democrat thing is the biggest crock of shit that there is. And it's one of the reasons that the party ran the U.S. government into debt. And by the way, the Republicans are just as much to blame. They go along with the union bullshit as well. The prevailing wage. Look up the Davis-Bacon Act. Okay, the Davis-Bacon Act. I used to have to watch this or look at it. The Davis-Bacon Act of 1931. Okay, so yeah, it was signed into law by Herbert Hoover. This was before FDR. So this was a Republican. It says it's a United States federal law that establishes the requirement of paying the local prevailing wages on public works projects for laborers and mechanics. It applies to contractors and subcontractors performing on federally funded or assisted contracts in excess of $2,000 for the construction, alteration, or repair, including painting and decorating of public buildings or public works. So this was promoted by by two Republican legislators, James Davis and Robert Bacon. Okay, and they did this. So the Democrats are for the working people. No, neither party is for the working people. This is the biggest crap that there ever has been. Here we go. Fraud. In addition to claims of bias, researchers and investigators have found evidence of fraud. In 1995, the state of Oklahoma conducted an investigation into the WHD provided prevailing wages being used in state projects. Oklahoma had a little Davis-Bacon law that, in an attempt to save on administrative costs, adopted the federal standard. So this for Oklahoma state projects based on the Davis-Bacon Act. Okay, do you understand? So they voluntarily adopted as a state the same standard as Davis-Bacon. When the state office was notified that some rates had increased 162%, it requested information from the WHD. What is the WHD, by the way? Doesn't say here. Wage and Hours Division of the Department of Labor. So that's what it's called. The WHD denied the Oklahoma Department of Labor access to the survey forms used to determine the wages. So the Oklahoma Department of Labor undertook a criminal investigation. According to Brenda Renault, then the commissioner of the Oklahoma Department of Labor, the investigation found that grossly inaccurate information had been reported to the federal government by what the U.S. Department of Labor calls interested third parties. We found inflated numbers of employees on projects. So those are no-show jobs. Basically, you could have people who are on the job officially, but they don't show up, or you'd have people that don't even exist collecting wages, and they go to dummy accounts. That was in The Sopranos. Inflated wage rates reported for these same non-existent workers, and we found projects that were never built. We also noticed that what appears to be a pattern in the reporting method on many of the wage survey forms is our visual representation we'll show here today. So that's what union Democrats do. Okay, that's what union Republicans do too. There's a number of union Republicans out there too. Don't let anybody fool you to say that the Republican Party is entirely bought by the Koch brothers, and the Koch brothers too. I don't think that they really do justice to the issue of why public sector unions and prevailing wage laws are a huge waste, and why they're one of the reasons that infrastructure projects never get done. So that's it for that race. You see here. H.A. Goodman pointed out that GOP candidate asked his girlfriend to have an abortion in January of this year, although he presents himself as a pro-life conservative. Hypocrisy loses. Yeah, that's the guy who resigned, though. King Cuss says $500 screwdriver in government contracts. Yeah, things like that happen. King Cuss says kosher meat plant was, thanks to J-Man Truthseeker for joining, by the way, but King Cuss says kosher meat plant was not union workers, just undocumented. Absolutely. I know which one you're talking about. And if you want union workers to have some jobs, you might have to fight against illegal immigration. I'm not saying which one is better, undocumented immigrants or union workers, okay? But you can't have both. You can't have both. That's the lie that the Democrats tell people, that you can have a good paying union job, but you can also have tons of undocumented, unskilled labor entering the country. You can't have both of those. And a lot of the skilled labor, by the way, is also performed by illegal immigrants too. They're just not licensed in many cases. So yeah, he's right about that kosher meat plant, and a lot of meat plants, not just the kosher ones too. All of the, if you go to Colorado, where, what is it, Greeley, Colorado, most of the meat plants are populated by the laborers are illegal immigrants. So yeah, that meat plant and a lot of other meat plants as well. Lastly, so there was this Gina Hagel, or whatever her name was, Gina Haspel, that was appointed CIA director, and then Rex Tillerson was fired by President Trump. I have a couple of things to say about that, although I'm not going to go too long on it. First of all, about Gina Haspel with the torture. Okay, those of you asking me who would ask me if I want to condemn this for her being involved in torture. My position on the CIA is this: that I think the CIA has been completely corrupted for decades, going back through the Cold War, and that we might have won the Cold War despite the CIA, not because of them. And a lot of the reasons we won the Cold War was because we were economically superior, and because we ran the Soviet Union out of money. So the reason that I don't care who this person is not because I support her. I guess if you wanted me to say it, yeah, I guess I oppose it. Fine. The reason I oppose it is because I think the CIA needs to be broken up, and it needs to be replaced by an agency that respects the law of the United States. This is a company. They call it the company, by the way, a lot of the people who are associated with it. I don't know if they call it that just because the media likes them calling it that, or they call it that because they really like calling it that. But the CIA has been run by some of the worst liars in the history of the country, and the torture issue is secondary. The torture issue, I guess, is bad. Remember though that a lot of these in American law, a lot of these terrorists that were tortured, they don't have constitutional rights. Okay, they're not U.S. citizens. Many of them, the majority of them, the vast majority of them, don't have constitutional rights under our law. That doesn't settle the question of whether torture is wrong or right. I think that when you're in a war, a lot of people start to get philosophical about what's a war crime and what's not a war crime, right? You see, the objective of a war is to kill a lot of fucking people and take their territory and destroy their leaders. And I think in the 19th century they started with I think they started with the Geneva Conventions throughout the 19th century and going through through today. Since there was a number of conferences establishing more and more war crimes and whatever. That hasn't created a safer and more kinder and gentler type of war. So, do I support a torturer as head of the CIA? I don't support the CIA. So that's a stupid question to ask me. We had another CIA director who recently left, John Brennan, who supported mass surveillance of American citizens and wouldn't even come clean about that. So I think that is a much bigger problem. That's something that violates the Constitution. That violates the Fourth Amendment. That violates our rights as U.S. citizens. So that's secondary. King Cuz says, well, now you're hitting home for me. He has a number of these. I went and got a college degree in home building, attempting to follow my grandfather's footprints. However, living in South Texas, if I go on to a job site, I won't be able to communicate with any coworkers as they mostly all will be speaking Spanish. So it would be difficult for me to get my foot in the door in that. And then if it were to come to managing a crew of non-English speakers, I don't know how well that would work. J-Man True Seeker also says, I feel that like the communist demons were stopped in Russia, but then decided to take root in America. Well, in any case, talking about the CIA, so the everybody does it rule applies to the CIA when it comes to torture, unfortunately, because China does it, Russia does it. That I think is not that is a problem with the CIA if you have a problem with torture. And I'm not saying that I like it that we torture people, but you're dealing with terrorists. You're dealing with people who have already violated many of the rules of war. It's a rule of it's also a violation of war acts. If you by the way, if you're a terrorist, it's the same as if you're a spy, and they don't have the same prisoner of war rights as soldiers. By the way, if you're concealing yourself and you're detonating a bomb, or you're doing other sorts of clandestine activities, no, you don't enjoy the same protections as a soldier on a battlefield. It's not the same thing. It literally isn't the same thing. That's why it's so dangerous to be a spy. Now, are there civilian issues with torture? Some of these people are technically civilians around the world. I think if you're asking for the world system of justice to deal with that, you're going to be very disappointed going forward. They're not going to deal with that. They have a hard time actually holding their own leaders to account. Did you see the recent scandal with the UN peacekeepers basically trafficking women and raping them and things like that? So who exactly is supposed to actually enforce these phony baloney laws anyway? Nobody. It's a worthless cause. And it shouldn't make you feel good to hear that, but that's the way it is. So no, I don't support the new CIA director because I don't support the CIA because of what they do here. I could, the waterboarding and the other crap. I get it; it's gruesome. That's not the reason I don't support the CIA. You can have your moral compass or whatever, but I believe that if you have a CIA that surveils U.S. civilians and participates in all these dirty tricks against people here, that's the real problem, and that's why they're able to get away with all that crap overseas, because we let them do shit over here that they do overseas. That could go back decades. The Church Committee, they found in the Church Committee, by the way, that the CIA and the NSA were spying on members of Congress. So it's not like this crap with Donald Trump. This surveillance of Donald Trump is a new thing. It's just gotten so much attention because it's him, and he's able to get so much attention for it. So that's about it for that. And of course, Rex Tillerson also fired. Good. but I don't care for the new Secretary of State. Rex Tillerson, I didn't support as Secretary of State. I think when the whole issue came of, you know, looking through Trump's cabinet when he first came into office, I don't remember if I made a video on this. Sorry for the Hillary coughs, by the way. Uh, at least I'm not slipping out of my chair. But look, when he came into office, and so did all of these other Republican or Trump appointments to the cabinet, Tillerson was at the top of the list of the people I did not want to be in the cabinet because he was an oil lobby representative. He was an Exxon Mobil guy. This was a key betrayal, in my opinion, by Trump, putting somebody who was effectively a lobbyist for the oil industry at the head of the State Department. I have an article from Vox where they complain a lot about him not not filling positions in the State Department. I don't give a fuck. The State Department has been a failure for years. I think that the State Department could probably be cut many times over. Some of the other people I by the way, didn't like that he appointed were Stephen Mnuchin. I think that he should have appointed somebody like that Peter Navarro guy that was they were talking about, that pushed Gary Cohn out of the Trump White House. I think they could have appointed somebody or somebody that's simply like Tom Woods, for example, a hard money guy. Tom Woods. Some of these economists, by the way, they would be good in several positions. There's Tom Woods. There's who's that guy? Lou Rockwell. People like that. Why can't they be treasurers? Why can't they be? There's a lot of people out there that could make good cabinet appointments, and instead, who did they pick? Rex Tillerson and Steve Mnuchin. Chris Jones is here. Welcome, buddy. Catherine says the terrorists were people turned by friends and neighbors, and for huge sums of money, they were ID'd by less reliable means than the Salem witch tortures creates enemies. Nothing more. I don't care. You don't understand. I do not care, because in my opinion, I don't care if this person did the worst crap in the world at the CIA. The issue is whoever you appoint to be head of the CIA will have been a part of that. So the real problem is what they do here. Now, what they do overseas is partially a result of the fact that we let them get away with everything that they do over here. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't care. I don't care if these people they may be innocent. Some of these people are innocent, and a lot of them are not. But the CIA is not a law enforcement agency. They're a terror. Well, some call them a terrorist agency. I was gonna say something I would have probably taken back, because it's not really what I think. But what the CIA is an intelligence agency, supposedly, that they perform dirty tricks overseas. So no, I'm not going to support either her or anybody who's going to be appointed head of the CIA who doesn't actually execute ground to top reform in the agency. How can you trust someone who does something worse than useless? And so many people would probably ask, why, if I didn't like Tillerson, and I'm probably not going to like Mike Pompeo, who would I support to be Secretary of State? That's a very difficult question for me. I was thinking Norm Macdonald, who's Canadian, actually would be a good Secretary of State, because he could investigate the whole issue of why Germans love David Hasselhoff. So that was my joke from yesterday. I don't know if any of you will liked Norm Macdonald from the 90s, but that was his big thing. I think that. So she says, how can you trust someone who does something worse than useless? I don't know who she's talking about. Betsy DeVos, by the way, also, people are criticizing her because they're saying, oh, how can she be Secretary of Education when she doesn't even visit the worst public schools in Michigan and whatever? Look, I've supported ending dissolving the Department of Education. So fine, don't have Betsy DeVos, don't have a secretary, don't have an agency Don't have a department. I don't care. Okay, the people who what does the Department of Education do to set public policy in education? All they do is what they really do is they take a lot of money to help define curriculums, and to some extent they give funds to schools that might need them. Why do you need an agency to collect money to spread it out? Can you answer that question? So that's the whole essence of the tax system. So Betsy DeVos, sure, I'll support firing Betsy DeVos if it means dissolving the Department of Education. Then we have a deal. Who was the last Department of Education head? I don't think you know. I think that fundamentally schools should be managed at the local level or at the state level. The Common Core thing was a complete failure. I illustrate that in an article I wrote recently for Hard News Network called Multiculturalism is the Real, well, I don't even remember the title here, but do I have it in the description? No. So just check out Hard News Network. I'll find it. Multicultural education. So I've said, yeah, the toxic stew of multicultural education. I'll put that in the chat so you guys can check it out. And you guys should read some of the stuff I put out there on the Hard News Network, because it takes me a long time, and it addresses some of that. Also, it should address the gun violence in schools issue. Think about it, we've had the Department of Education for so many years, and yet education is getting worse. They continually say that the funding is the issue, but then you get these teachers who get arrested for dumbass things, having sex with kids, stuff like that. I don't think it was as common as it was back then, or I don't think it's as common. I think it's more common now than it was back before there was a Department of Education. So why can't they address that issue? All of these teachers that are, they don't make enough money, so they end up becoming administrators. Could it be because of the tenure system in public schools? The real solution is to end the Department of Education, and every state, if you have these states that are basically against charter schools and against school choice or whatever, let's wait a few years, see how good they do, and then you'll find probably that these states are going bankrupt, and the students are not getting smarter, and they're just being filled with this multicultural crap. Okay, now I'm not putting out a scientific study about that at the moment, but I'm not pretending to either. Like that person who put out that trans uber gay story that I just read to you. Rex Tillerson is gone. The next Secretary of State, I think, will also be very, very, very under Trump's thumb. And that's going to be it. The real foreign policy the person who really determines foreign policy in this administration will be President Trump. It's not going to be Mike Pompeo. It's not going to be whoever is his deputy secretary of state. It's not going to be any of those people. It's going to be him, and that's going to be the end of story. I think that he's enough of a micromanager and a hands-on, arguer, and he will get what he wants regardless of whether his Secretary of State likes it or not. And that's the lesson with Rex Tillerson. He was a bad pick to begin with. There were probably a few better people he could have picked, and some people were saying, John Bolton, whatever. No, why John Bolton? You don't need more neocons in the administration. I think you need people who are going to go along more with Trump's trade agenda, not with his not with getting more interventions overseas, but with foreign policy through trade. That's his preferred way to make friends, and that's the way it's going to work. Okay, so I think one of those people that I mentioned as far as Treasury secretaries could be a good Secretary of State. As good of a Secretary of State as Rex Tillerson, that's for sure. Why not? Why not Lou Dobbs, the guy from CNN, the anti-immigration guy? I think he actually speaks Spanish too. The priority should be Latin America for the Secretary of State. Getting America back on track with doing trade deals with Latin America, and creating an alternative bloc on the Western Hemisphere. And it wouldn't even be really a bloc. It'll be just like a lot of countries that trade on an even-keeled basis, without all of this crap like in the EU with fixed pricing and determining whose waters get to be fished in or not, for everybody by the entire union. That's the way that I want my Secretary of State to be conducting himself or herself under the Trump administration. So I don't think Mike Pompeo is that type of guy. So I don't think I would support him either. And as far as the next person, so as far as swamp creatures getting kicked out, I think this is a good move. I think that the next person to leave will probably be that H.R. McMaster guy. He's going to leave. Trump is probably going to recruit somebody with a similar mindset from the military, in the style of Michael Flynn. It could be somebody like Alan West, by the way, who's a former congressman and a CIA, not CIA. He's a U.S. Army colonel. He could be a great national security advisor. Would he be too much of a hawk, in my opinion? He could be, but he would probably be better than H.R. McMaster, who's definitely in with the internationalist school, the Council of Foreign Relations, the people that are legitimately called globalists. And yet, yes, H.R. McMaster is not Jewish, so that's not anti-Semitic to call him that, even though I could care less because I'm Jewish. So I can use the word, anybody can use the word globalist. The whole controversy of that was the biggest bullshit of the past few weeks. So yeah, Gary Cohen's gone, Rex Tillerson's gone, hopefully soon H.R. McMaster. That's about it for right now. This was kind of a long stream, but we went over a lot. And that's it. So talk to me later tonight, I think at 9 p.m. Could be later. I'll have to talk to him. I'm going to have a chat with Bandsaw Bandit, if you know who that is. One of the people who is in the chat frequently about Australian politics, Australian issues. This could be a theme. If you live in one of those other countries around the world, or if you want to talk about issues in your area, you can also contact me. We could have you on too, but Bandsaw did. So, we're going to talk to him and see what his thoughts are. So have a great night or great afternoon, and we'll see you then.